You are listening to the Practicing the Art of Small Business podcast with Shannyn Merlo and Julie Parker. Enjoy this conversation about business, leadership, and the self-awareness journey to great success.
Hello, Julie, and hello, listeners to Practicing the Art of Small Business. We're on episode number 62. It's been a while since we recorded, but it's always such a pleasure. Julie, how are you?
Super well. Thanks so much for asking, Shannyn. It's so delightful. You've been on a trek since we last were online together. I think this is our first one since you've returned back.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I went to India. I did some hiking in the Himalayas for those who are not Indian. And I feel like we should probably call it the Himalayas, given that that's what they call it, because it's in their country. But you know.
Oh, do they call it? I thought you were having a bit of a joke there. Is that what they call it?
The Himalayas.
Oh, no, we call it the same thing as what they call it.
No idea.
That's like me saying, well, I know Shannyn calls herself Shannyn, but I call her Shannyn. So therefore she'd be known as Shannyn.
Let's not call me Shannyn. Let's not.
That's it. Like call it how'd you call it?
Himalayas.
Himalayas. Well, we're calling it the Himalayas if that's the correct pronunciation.
I don't know. I just picked up on that. So, and every person, like Indian person who I spoke to before I went, was calling it the Himalayas, and I was like, oh, maybe this is just a weird thing. But when I was there, all the beautiful Indian people that we were there with, were calling it the Himalayas, and so it was an amazing trip. And the one thing that sits really solidly within me is how important for me it is to make sure, like, I'm really driven by travel, and not travel itself, but the experience of what you get when you travel, different cultures, different ways of seeing the world, different experiences, getting out of your comfort zone. I'm not one to travel and sit at a resort for 10 days drinking cocktails. Don't get me wrong. I'd like a cocktail, but not not the whole time. So that adventure and that difference of seeing things like it can expand your mind much more than anything that you might be able to do at home, just simply because you're in a different environment. So
yeah, that's it. Change your environment, change your experience, change your perspective. Wonderful, glorious. How terrific! How terrific. What are you talking about today, Shannyn?
Well, I'm not quite sure what we're going to call this one, because there's a few elements that we're going to probably tie together, and ultimately it's sort of about personal productivity and effectiveness is kind of the big picture. But I also want to, within our discussions, talk about the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20, which is kind of where this discussion started. But also it's about the impact of language, which we've done a podcast on before, but that's kind of, I'm just kind of alluding to it, and that's what I think we're going to touch on today. That's what I think.
Very topical for me. As you know, we've had a couple of conversations about me doing the being profile, the fantastic Ashkan Chashvia, who I've just recently discovered. Thank you, Jutta, for bringing me into communication with him. And I've just done a workshop with Jutta about the being profile. And, yeah, I've come to that same conclusion, that they're productive, effectiveness, this study of both of those areas and how it's going to impact our not just working lives but lives in general.
Well, so maybe I'll start with the 80-20 thing, because it seems to be a theme in my coaching over the past month. It's been a while, actually, because I've noticed that if you're unfamiliar with the Pareto principle, Pareto, thank you. My mouth doesn't work. Or I didn't know how to say it anyway. What it is basically, so if you look at your revenue in your business, let's say, take this as an example, you might find that 20% of your customers are bringing in 80% of your revenue, or 20% of your marketing activities is bringing in 80% of your leads. So what that says is that when we are looking at making a business more effective, or looking at where do we invest more money, or are my team members doing what they need to be doing, when we look at it with this 80-20 rule, it generally runs true that we can look at lots of the things in our lives and realize that really a very small portion of what we do or who we interact with or whatever it might be is getting us the results. So we can actually be way more efficient and effective if we have that mindset in play. So, for example, your clients who are earning you the least amount of revenue, you wouldn't spend as much time or energy or time, energy, or whatever the other word I was going to think of was.
Money.
Money, as you would the top 20%, simply because you don't have time or energy to do that and you're not going to get the return anyway.
Yeah, it is. It really does bring about its own clarification over all the stuff that you do is not as effective as each particular, or just say you had 20 things to do today, they're not all equally effective at you at helping you achieve your goal, isn't it? It's saying, well, of those 20 things, for example, that you're going to be doing today, look at the 20% stuff. Look at the 20% of the stuff that's going to get you 80% of your results.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you're doing the stuff that you know is nowhere near in your 20%, but that's your constant in your daily to-do list or your weekly to-do list, then you're probably not being effective. So, Julie, one of the things that you've talked about quite a lot on this podcast is your beautiful affirmation, I'm super productive, as you go on your power walks. But for me, for whatever reason, it never stuck for me in my head. Like I'd try it, but it just didn't stick. And I don't know why that is. But what's happened is as I started to think about this 80-20 and I'm banging on to my clients about being more effective, the word that started to resonate for me was I'm super effective. And so with that, I've started to do that affirmation, I'm super effective, and it's sticking and it's altering things for me. And so what I wanted to share is that power of language for our listeners, that if there's something that is in your environment that's not working for you, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not working. It might be the wrong, talking marks, language, not wrong, it's not bad, but is it the language that's connecting with you on what your values are, on what's important for your interpretation of the word?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's my story.
Absolutely. And it is such an important thing to get the wording right. It is such an important thing for us to really, we want to be effective in life and we want to be successful in life. But quite often we can fall into a trap that thinking that this particular thing is me being successful, where actually is it being effective? And I'm going on a bit of a dance around. What brought me to this recognition that they are two wildly different things, productivity and effectiveness, is in this being profile. So just to give everyone a bit of a snapshot of what the being profile is. The being profile was developed by Ashkan Tashvia. He born, I think, in Iran, grew up here in Australia. It is not so much a personality profile, although it is tracking that. But whereas personality profiles are quite they can be quite rigid and say, well, this is the way this person is. The being profile is more about recognizing how you evolve as a human being as well. And it's identifying who you are in this moment in time. And you go into each of these ways of being to see how it's affecting you and what your relationship with these ways of being are. Examples of the ways of being are effectiveness, reliability, fear and anxiety, all these relationships that we have with these ways of being. We all experience them, but we're on a scale of healthy relationship with it or unhealthy relationship with it. So it's recognizing things like you won't get through your life without feeling fear and anxiety. But what do you do with that fear and anxiety? Is it a healthy relationship with that or an unhealthy relationship with that? It's really been such a profound process for me to move through this being profile and then through the workshop with Jutta, and I'll pop all of her details in the show notes as well. But what it helped, because as you know, I'm like, that's one of my affirmations that I say on a repetitive basis from years ago. I'm super productive. I'm super productive. For those who haven't tapped into previous episodes, you could do I'm super confident or I'm super caring or whatever the thing is. And it's just the repetition of these affirmations, these active repetition of these affirmations. So it actually does change your behavior. and change your belief system. And when I developed I'm Super Productive, I had 5 clients. I had a lot of stuff to do, and I was feeling overwhelmed by the sheer number of tasks. And so I spent so much time wasted thinking about the overwhelm, thinking about the number of tasks without actually doing the number of tasks. And so with that I'm super productive affirmation, it worked beautifully because I stopped all the resistance around doing the stuff that's required. However, going through the being profile, one of the questions is, are you effective? So it takes you through the true meaning of effectiveness. And it was through that I'm like, oh, crap, I am super productive, but am I being super effective? I'm not. It's not translating into the stuff that I'm trying to achieve. And so it was such an eye-opening moment for me that I thought, stop patting yourself on the back at the end of every day because you got 50 things done. If you didn't get one effective thing done that truly led you towards your goals, what's the point of the day?
Mm.
And the being profile is great because then it helps you tap into, in order to be having a better relationship with effectiveness, now you also have to look into your consistency and these other ways of being. It starts to realize how this is all a jigsaw pieces thing fitting in with each other. One can't exist by itself. For example, in order to be really effective, you might need to say no to people who are asking things of you. Mm. And so you won't be effective if you've got a poor relationship with saying no to people. And so it's really a self-awareness, but opportunity for great self-development in this process as well. And I have found it was like a light bulb. One moment I was all for being super productive, and the next moment I was all for being super effective, and the things I was telling myself were no longer good enough. For example, for me, it's sales. I have never been a great salesperson. Always feel like I'm imposing myself on people and trying to push them into doing something they would not normally do.
Wow, so there's a unpacking your language right there, Julie. Holy moly, there's a definite ability to reframe in that.
Yeah. And so I've lived with that. I have told myself that for decades, yeah? Really, and I can see where it comes from sometimes too. But coming from the dental profession, you don't want to be hard sales. It is all about providing what's best for the patient. You give them all the options, and then you hands off. You're not pushing them. You're not, you're following them up to a professional degree, but not to a degree with the intention to get them to buy. And so I think that, it kind of helped lay the groundwork for that. And now I work in those teams too, who all have the same mindset. And so we're all feeding off each other. It's just brilliant.
Can I also, do you mind if I ask a question?
Please.
Had you also experienced, because beliefs come from experiences, right?
Yeah.
And so had you also experienced, I'm imagining with dental practices, you get a lot of representatives coming out and kind of, want to buy a watch, I've got a watch, I've got a pamphlet, I've got a this, I've got a that. And you're like, whoa, just back up. Had that happened for you? Because I know that sometimes when we're talking sales, particularly with clients, they've formed this belief from a negative experience of a salesperson or people, and yet they've not actually thought about the sales experiences that have been these beautiful relationships and connections, and where they've actively gone, I want this, then they had a really beautiful experience, and then they got that and it was a great experience. So, I'm just curious about that belief.
Both sides of it. Let me tell you, working in a dental practice, dentists are bombarded by finance people, real estate people, dental consumable companies, dental equipment companies, because there's that perception dentists have a lot of money and they can access a lot of money because they're a good loan risk and all the things. And so we're just going to hound them. And so absolutely, that when phone calls come through, emails come through, people come through the front door, the initial thing, because we're told to do this, don't interrupt me, don't make an appointment time for me to see a rep. Like, that's my lunch break, that's my coffee break, and every other time I'm in with a patient. So it is a bit of there are some practices that are a little bit more open-minded when it comes to that, wanting to see these opportunities. There's opportunities for new products and learn about them, training in existing products, and all the things. But then Also, I was a dental rep, a very bad dental rep for 6 months. And I then was the rep coming into the practice, copying the face I used to deliver to reps. Like, they look all happy when they think you're a patient. And then when they realize that you're not a patient, that you're actually a rep, their face drops. They've got no enthusiasm to talk to you anymore. And so you do feel like an imposition. It's so difficult to get to have effective conversations with the key people, all the things. And I became very bad at it because I would drive from one car park to another, building my self-confidence up enough to walk through the front door, and half the time fail to do so, just get back in my car again and go to the next car park and do the same thing.
Julie.
So it was pretty revolting. So, yeah. And so because of all that baggage, because of all of that repetition and belief system that I've had going on for a good couple of 3-4 decades, you can imagine my sheer delight that when I had this light bulb moment, all the resistance to selling has gone. And I have been on the phone, email, SMSing, Facebook messaging since then, following up on leads that I half-assed followed up on the past so I wouldn't be in a position, and I've got none of that internal dialogue anymore. How can I word this in a way that is going to be as gentle as possible? How can I be helpful rather than salesy? And I've come back to that. So it's really quite freeing for me from that perspective, that the burden of the sales that stopped me from doing any sales in the past, sometimes awareness is all you need to then be free of it. Sometimes you're going to work on things, but sometimes it's just the awareness to be free of it. But it has had this knock-on effect as well. I should go back one step. And this is probably the case with most professions. I work a lot, with dental team members who say, I've already got enough on my plate. Don't put any more things on my plate. But it plays into that too. What are the things on your plate? Are they actually impactful? And are there things that we can prioritise really down the bottom that if they don't end up getting done, that's okay because we're getting that 20% done, which is what you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot. That's like,
I know, and I had more too, but I didn't want to hog the mic for too long.
You can hog the mic, Julie. There's been plenty of times I've been on a Shannyn tangent. So feel free to continue to share, Julie. I do want to overlay what you've said with the personal productivity. I'm currently listening to an audiobook called Hyper Efficient. And it's talking about how our brains work in terms of our ability to do all the things. And actually sometimes in order to move into a more efficient or effective brain space, we do need to do some of those things that are just ticking things off the list, but we still want to make sure that those ticking things off the list are effective. I had someone once say that their advisor or whatever, because they were hell-bent on a zero inbox. The end of the day, they had to get to a zero inbox. And their advisor was like, why? Why? It's like, no, because I have to. And it's like, why? Like, just because you're replying to all these emails doesn't mean that they're effective use of your time or energy or deleting or what have you. So not to say that's good or bad. You shouldn't look at my inbox because I definitely judge that. But it's just an interesting thing of like sometimes we do need to do those things that are still effective but maybe not the deep, big activities in order to be more effective later on. This is just a little sidebar on efficiency and effectiveness.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that I want to actually raise before, because I'll remember my thing. I don't want to forget asking you this. You mentioned before we hit record that in the mornings when you're waking up, the first thought is, I'm super effective, and it's stopping ruminating thoughts.
Yeah, so my beautiful brain, I love her so much. She's just she's an awesome, awesome little thing. Gosh, I love her. And that's actually language. No, you know what? That's actually language I'm using when I talk about my imposter. And I was having dinner with Tiff, who I went to India with last night, and she was beating up on her imposter, and I was like, how very dare. You got to love on that part of you. You have to show that part so much love, because that part is absolutely doing its best job to keep you as safe as houses right now. And it's just a small version of you that's a little bit scared. And you just got to love on her, and you got to give her a bit of a hug. And you need to then just say, look, I got you, boo. You're okay. Got my sage over here. Got my wiser version of me who's seen the future. And she's got my back now. So you're okay. So anyway, again, language. I know, I'm like, whoa, Shannyn, what's going on here? But my beautiful brain is a beautiful thing, and she likes to think a lot, even when there's nothing to think about. And having had periods of difficulty, I noticed that as soon as I'd wake up, she'd start talking, and it wasn't necessarily positive, but because I had nothing really concrete to replace it with, or I'd try and I'd play affirmation meditations or things like that, but there were too many things. So it was just lots of things. But by focusing on just that one thing, as soon as she starts doing like the doom and gloom story, which I love, because it's all about like risk mitigation, which is all great. It's more around going, you get to do risk mitigation just after I've woken up, if you don't mind. So while that's happening, I'm just going to be doing I'm super effective. And so that's just been a nice little way to wake up when I'm in sort of alpha wave, to kind of give myself something to focus on, to stop any the Shannyn bad news story starting to play, and just focusing the attention on one thing. And for some reason that super effective has stuck for right now. Yes.
Magnificent. I love it. Yeah. I love it, because it's better than being productive. Let's stop patting ourselves on the back for being so productive all the time. Let's start patting ourselves on the back for being effective.
Well, also, like, one thing I wanted to raise is that really what I'm seeing is evolution and innovation in terms of that, productive. So when you're telling your story about when you brought that affirmation into your life, all that's happened now is you're innovating and you're evolving in
You're
the way.
Absolutely right. Yes.
And as part of your concept
of a journey. Yeah. Which is why you said right now that I'm super effective is working for me right now, knowing that it may evolve into something else in the future.
Well, you're a smart girl, Julie. You catch on. You're like this.
And the thing I mentioned before as well that we didn't have in the recording, which is something else, another aspect to it that I've found in my life ever since I'm got the intention to be super effective every day, is that I'm going to the gym every day. In the past, I would go to the gym when I had time, when I could see a break in all the tasks I had to get done that day. And if I didn't get a chance to go to the gym, it was completely okay with me, because I thought, well, I have had a busy day. Look at all the things I have to get done. I don't have time to squeeze that in. That's okay, because productivity. But now, since I've had that shift, I'm going to the gym every day with zero resistance, loving it, because it's not an interruption to my day anymore, because going to the gym equals being effective. And so I'm not getting all the things done anymore. I'm more quick to not put them in the diary in the first place, or to look at it and say, well, I've dragged that for a week now, I can turf that one, rather than I've dragged it for 3 months and I'll turf it. But the other aspects of life, such as, family, friend nurturing, relationship nurturing, doing all the other things outside of work, it's expanding out to all of that as well. And so rather than resisting all that stuff because it just takes time away from me being productive, it's helping me build an effective life. And so I've got time for everything, and I'm loving everything.
And what's interesting is the only thing that's changed is the meaning that you're placing on a word.
That's it. Yeah, focusing on one word rather than another. And I've written down here, this is why we have to look at, what does success look like? And no longer does success look like to me getting 50 things done in a day. Success, if I had one very effective task to get done in a day and it took me 1 hour, I can get to the end of that day without doing anything else and go, what an effective day.
Yeah.
How beautiful is that?
It's been a while since I've read The 4-Hour Workweek, but I'm pretty sure that that's what his thing was about, actually, focusing on the thing that is the most effective use of your time allows you to get to a 4-hour workweek.
Yeah, yeah. And it was a Tim Ferriss thing, the question of if you only had 1 hour a week to do your job, what would you spend that 1 hour doing?
Yeah.
I'm going to have a lot of free time, Shannyn, a lot of free time.
But it allows you to pursue the things that are more meaningful to you. And if you're like, well, it's all meaningful to me. I love doing the things. I love doing the busy. Rock on. You do the busy. Love that for you. But at least you've managed to get the one effective thing out the door, and then you get to do whatever you want with the rest of your time.
And how often do we hear and use in the past, I don't know if you and I use this anymore, but how often do we hear people saying, saying, oh, I would pick up a hobby, but I have no time. I would, do these things that are good for life generally. I would meditate. Who's got the time? Who's got the time? And so it changes that internal dialogue, because what you were saying before is that I've got so many things to get done every day, I don't have time for these additional things. And so that's my internal dialogue. However, when our success looks like effectiveness, all of a sudden these other areas, they raise in importance over a lot of the tasks that we're doing. And so it does release the tension we have around getting all the things done, because all the things we're stating in that sentence of I'm super effective. We're stating in that sentence that the sheer number of things I'm getting done every day, all of those things don't have the same level of importance.
Yeah. Well, I think also it's about what is priority. And when someone attempts to say, I'm too busy in front of me, you can be sure that I'm like, if you're watching on the YouTubes, I just had a physical reaction to that. And I say, well, are you too busy, or are you just not prioritizing right? Yeah. And that you're like, or you decided not to prioritize it. And that word really helps people go, okay, yeah, no, I just, so you didn't think it was important enough. And that's okay.
That's
so
okay. That's the truth. Yeah.
That's the truth. And just own that. That's totally okay. I'm cool with that. But just own it. But the thing about prioritization is there's a beautiful quote that I think is really poignant. And the quote is, if you do not make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness. And that really is, I probably should let that land. One moment.
Oh, that's true. And that's a lot of time you've got to allocate to illness, that's for sure. That's a lot of time.
If you do not make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness. And in terms of like thinking about life on a spectrum of what's important, when we say we're too busy to invest in stress relief, self-care, going to the gym, eating well, things like that, well, when you get the blood test back and the doctor says, turns out things aren't good, well, what happens then? You've made time to go to the doctor. You'll make time to go to the specialist. You'll make time to get surgery. You'll make time to pay for. You'll find the money to pay for it. Whereas if we thought about this on the continuum of life, that actually I've got to think about my life as a series of prioritizations and what is the most important, then it does start to, and if you think, well, if I've only got 3 hours of effective time in the day to live to my values, to be aligned with my goals, to live in my purpose, what are you actually going to do in that? What phone calls are you going to make? Which people are you going to connect up with? Which bridges are you going to repair? Because you never know when time's not going to be there anymore.
That's it.
Sorry, I've gone deep.
And it's interesting because with life, no longer do we have to use a scrubbing washing board to wash our clothes.
Oh, you don't?
And roll them through the wringer.
Oh, you don't?
That's right. No longer do we do horse and cart. We've got cars now. That's it. That's it. We've got no longer do we send snail mail. We send emails instead. No longer do we need to telephone each other. We can just do a quick SMS. All of these things are making everything quicker and quicker and quicker. So we can get more stuff done every day. AI, no longer do I have to spend a day researching something. I can get all my research done in about 10 minutes and have a finalised document within half an hour with AI. And so everything in the world or many things in the world are being designed to make us be quicker and get more done. And so what does today, what did yesterday, what will be in the future is the thing that differentiates us over others, not so much that, but what makes us be ultimately successful if we are thinking about success in terms of impact on our life and the lives around us is our ability to be effective. No one's going to get to the end of their life and say, because she was so productive, this is all the wonderful things that happened in her life. Like, it's because she was effective doing stuff. That's legacy. That's impact. That is growing and learning as a human being, because we're always seeking ways to be better and better effective.
It does remind me, and I'm getting completely out of the weeds now, but I used to work with someone who used to reply to every email with a thank you. And I said to this person, I was like, I'm just assuming that you're thankful. Like, you sending that email, you've had to take effort and brain space and time to send the email, and then I've got to read the email, and then I've got to delete the email. So I appreciate that you're saying thank you, but we work with each other, and I'm just going to assume that you're thankful. So you could stop that for me.
You should start emailing back, you're welcome.
Could you imagine? It is a little bit like I do like now, though, that Microsoft have a reaction to emails. So I've noticed that.
That's good, because sometimes you don't know if they have actually received it. It could go to spam. It could be lost in the thread, all the things. It could have gone off into the ether. And I've often thought to myself, gosh, sometimes you just need that ability to tick something, acknowledged it. Like, I've seen it, not that I've responded to it or read the whole thing, but I've received it. I am aware of it. And so there is a thumbs up that you can do now with email.
I've seen it. I've seen it on some Microsoft emails, but then I have to delete it. So that's annoying.
Then you have to delete it.
Well, yeah, because you're getting an email to say the person thumbed up on the email.
Oh, so then that email you're then deleting.
I'm still having to delete it.
Like a version of thank you. You're like, it still takes time from you.
It's not so bad. There probably needs to be a list. Like, here are all the emails that people have acknowledged. Great.
Yeah. Well, I used to have Boomerang attached to my Gmail, and it was so brilliant because email, if it hadn't been opened, you could bounce it back to you in whatever period of time. I used to say, bounce it back to me in 3 days if it hasn't been opened. That was super helpful.
Wow.
But then Boomerang started charging way too much for that service, and so I stopped it. But I suffered the loss of it. So this is important. This is the way we describe as you say, the dialogue we use for our life absolutely either impedes us, is neutral to, or encourages us to do better, achieve more, be more effective.
So what have we not covered off on, Julie?
How to be slack. I'm super slack.
I'm so lazy. I love it. I'm so lazy.
Do one effective thing every day, and I've got nothing else to do all day.
Feet on the desk. I think that's how people got into day trading, wasn't it?
Probably. That's exactly right. But I think this episode, it's a very good step, I feel like, to encourage people to shift from having productiveness being their goal. Try on effectiveness instead, like with yourself, it resonated better. So try on effectiveness instead and just see how it impacts the way you approach every day.
Well, I think also, like, deeper than that is when we've done a podcast on it, your language affects your reality. So what language are you using to describe things? And is it effective use of language to actually describe things? I don't want to riff out too much, but it happened over COVID where everyone, wasn't in the office anymore. And so the metrics of success changed from, well, in order for me to think that you're good at your job, I need to see you between 9 and 5. No. We came to realize that actually it's very much outcomes driven. You can do your work whatever time of the day, but as long as you achieving what your goals and objectives and what have you are, you do you. So it's really about that, looking at how we're interpreting the world. Is it helping or hindering us from actually having a more effective life, business experience?
I love that you raised that, because what you and I've spoken about for a majority of this episode is how it's affected us personally. But when we're working in teams, surely all those team members need to be aware of, and we need to make an agreement about what is effective task and what is not effective task, but it still needs to be done at some point. Like, have these agreements, because every now and again I've had a practice owner contact me and say, can you help me with my receptionist? She seems busy all the time, but she gets nothing done. And that's the first thing I do. I say, well, get together, talk about all the tasks that she's doing and that are required for the position, and make an agreement of what's priority 1, 2, and 3. But I think as a team, we need to really tap into, given that this is our vision, given that this is our team culture, and given that these are our goals for our dental practice or business entity, let's agree on what tasks are going to be our 20% of the Pareto principle tasks that are going to get 80% of our results. Let's all at the very least agree to that, because they're the must-dos every day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so is it time to do a bit of a rappity rap?
Wicka. Go.
It's pretty simple. Break down the things in your life and business into the Pareto principle. Gosh, I'm so sorry. The Pareto principle. And that's 80-20, the idea that 20% of your activity is getting 80% of your results, and the other way around as well. That our language has an impact, and think about it from an evolution and innovation perspective, that constant improvement is the way that you're experiencing the world right now, helping you to achieve what you want for the future version of you. Don't beat up on your imposter, and think about how you are prioritizing your work and your life activities to be most effective. And what does effectiveness means? It generally means a long, healthy life full of love and connection.
Oh, crazy. You said it was going to be a simple wrap-up. Has quite a bit of depth to it.
I know. I just made that up right at the end. I was just like, I'm feeling a lot of love at the moment. So for no particular reason, just because I'm loving so much on my little imposter. So.
Oh, it's glorious. Thank you very much, Shannyn. I really enjoyed this episode, and I love the journey that we've both been on to, at the same time, come to the same space. Amazing. Talk about In Sync. And I'm not talking about the boy band In Sync.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure our demographic is the older demographic, but there is, people under 30 who would not know what you're talking about.
That's for sure. And they're at the top of my brain because I've only just finished watching the Netflix documentary on the guy that put In Sync and other boy bands together. And
That's an interesting story.
Because he had the longest running Ponzi scheme. He ran his own Ponzi scheme for 40 plus years. And so it's the longest running Ponzi scheme that people are aware of. And it was a lovely reminder that if I lived that life, I would be like in the fetal position in the corner of a room, rocking because of all the pressure of getting the next bit of money. For him, it was no big deal whatsoever. So it's quite extraordinary. So it was an interesting story.
Yeah. Well, talking about interesting stories, I'm going to do some effective work after we hang up.
I'm going to do some effective running my mum around to a doctor.
Fun times for both
and it's not an interruption to my day because it's effective. Effective. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Shannyn. It's been so delightful.
Such a pleasure.
I'm pleased you got back safe and well from the Himalayas.
Himalayas. It was amazing. It was one of my best trips, except for Cambodia. That was pretty good. Morocco was pretty good. I just like traveling.
Oh, you've been around. You've been
I've
around.
been
That's what I
around.
heard. Yeah, that's what
I've
it says on the toilet door.
South America, somewhere in South America, maybe Peru, Brazil, maybe.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Who knows what the future holds, Julie? I just know I'll be effective on my journey there.
I wish you well in your effectiveness.
And with that said, goodbye, Julie.
Ciao.